This project uses chunky yarn to create a cute daisy chain wreath, which is perfect for spring decor or in a nursery. If you enjoy fiber projects, you can learn more about weaving, macrame, punch needle, and more on my website at HelloHydrangea.com, where I have online classes, kits, and more tutorials. Let's get started. You will need about 10 yards of thick pink yarn and 5 yards of thick white yarn. You will also need some elastic hair ties, some wooden beads, which are actually optional, a wide eye needle, and some thin white yarn. You will also need a 10-inch metal hoop. I am using the Bloom Weaver set of yarns from Love Fest Fibers. I love their yarn because it is chunky and soft, spun in small batches from premium merino wool and organic cotton. If you get this pack, you can actually make 2 wreaths, one with blush pink flowers and the other with toasted coconut flowers, splitting the linen white yarn between the two. Start by unrolling your balls of yarn and finding the center. Wrap the 2 tails around your hand and secure them with an elastic hair tie so that you can pull out more length as you need it. Cut about 2 yards of thin white yarn. Tie the thin white yarn onto the center point of the thick white yarn, leaving a 4-inch tail to tuck in later. Take the center of the blush yarn and slide it under the thick white yarn, and then pull the tails through the loop. Center the knot over the thin white yarn. You now have 5 tails, 2 blush, 2 thick white, 1 thin white. Start on the right side, making a backwards 4 with the blush yarn so that the tail goes over the thick white yarn towards the center. Pull it back out through the loop. Make another backwards 4 with the same blush yarn so that the tail goes under the thick white yarn towards the center. Pull it back out through the loop. This is 1 lark's head knot. Repeat again. Go over and under. Now there are 2 lark's head knots on the right side of the thick white yarn. Move to the left side. Make a 4 with the blush yarn so that the tail goes over the thick white yarn towards the center. Pull it back out through the loop. Make another 4 with the same blush yarn so that the tail goes under the thick white yarn towards the center. Pull it back out through the loop. Don't add a 2nd lark's head knot on this side. There should only be 1 on the left of the thick white yarn. If you want to add a wooden bead to the center of the flowers, use a needle to slide one onto the thin white yarn now. Now cross the left thick white yarn and the right thick white yarn over the thin white yarn, creating a large loop. Guide the right blush yarn under the bottom of the loop and out between the white and the blush yarn. Guide the left blush yarn under the bottom of the loop and out between the white and blush yarn. Pull the tails of the thick white yarn and the blush yarns to tighten the knots, closing the loop around the bead and completing your first flower. Now pull all of the tails down together, except the left thick white yarn. Guide it under the rest of the tails towards the right, then over the rest of the tails back to the left over itself. Guide the right thick white yarn over the left thick white yarn, and then through the loop that is left by the thick white yarn on the right side. It may take a bit of adjusting to tighten the knot. up below the flower. Now begin making the second flower. Again, cross the left thick white yarn under the thin white yarn and the right thick white yarn over the thin white yarn, creating a large loop. Guide the right blush yarn under the bottom of the loop and out between the white and blush yarns. Guide the left blush yarn under the bottom of the loop and out between the white and blush yarn. Pull the tails of the thick white yarn and the blush yarns to tighten the knots. Now repeat the steps to complete your flower, starting by creating 2 lark's head knots with the right blush yarn and the right thick white yarn. Create a backwards 4 and go over, under, over, under. Create 1 lark's head knot with the left blush yarn and the right thick white yarn. Create a 4 and go over, under. Slide a bead up into position. Cross the thick white yarns over and under the thin white yarn. Guide the blush yarns under the bottom of the loop and up out the sides. Tighten everything, and then knot the thick white tails around the rest of the tails and tighten. Repeat these steps over and over until you end up with 9 flowers. Pull lengths of yarn out of the elastic ties little by little as you need them. As you are working, the flowers will naturally create a curved shape. On the last flower or two, your right blush tail will be much shorter than your left and you might not have enough to finish. So you can switch when the 2 white tails are knotting around the rest of the tails before you begin a new flower. Finish with the white tails knotting around each other for a seamless transition between the first and last flower. Cut the rest of the tails, leaving about 6 to 8 inches. To connect the edges of the wreath, first slide the 2 thick white tails through the very first knot from the first flower on either side. Then flip the wreath over and tuck all the tails into light colors on the back so that they are secure and hidden from the front. Place a metal hoop over the back of the wreath and sew it through the flowers, making sure none of it shows on the front. Now your daisy chain wreath is complete and ready to hang. For more fiber goodness, find me on Instagram at HelloHydrangea.